Sentinel lights flashed out to sea along the Northland shore, and south along the sheltered bays where sailors came before. In wooden plank and hammered steel, with oak and mast and steam, the guardians of the lake stand true with piercing cold and beam. The guardians of the lake stand true with piercing cold and beam.
Welcome to Great Getaways. This is our second part in a two-part series on the lighthouses of the Michigan shore. I have a special guest with me today again, Dan Hall. And Dan, you've been with us for so many years. As a matter of fact, I got thinking about it. We're doing lighthouses. One of our first series was Ghosts and Guardians of the Great Lakes,
right.
And you were joining us then too and writing music for it.
Indeed, that was fun. I remember meeting you guys the first time at a little place in Grand Blanc, Michigan.
Yes.
You were out to hear me play, and then one thing led to another, and we were writing Discovering Michigan songs and the Northern Experience songs. And
now we're onto these lighthouses, which I know you have a passion for them. Hey, we've got one of the most famous Michigan lighthouses coming up next, Whitefish Point, the graveyard of the Great Lakes. And we're going to be doing a piece on the Edmund Fitzgerald when it sank.
Deep Superior down below, the folds of your gown are deathly cold. Deep Superior, it's no surprise, storm-lost crews will never rise.
Days like today are a captain's worst nightmare. And when the winds of November came early, the Whitefish Point Lighthouse was able to save all the ships, except one, the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Every vessel entering or leaving Lake Superior has to pass through Whitefish Point. Thus, a guardian of the lake was critical for safe navigation. The present 80-foot tower was built in 1902. Since 1970, the light has been automated and its range is 26 miles. The welcoming beacon is used by many upbound vessels as their point of departure for setting their course, and downbound vessels use it to make for Whitefish Bay.
The shipwreck that most people are aware of, most people know about, and really that most people arguably come to the museum to learn about would be the Edmund Fitzgerald. November 10th, 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald disappeared off of the radar screens of the Arthur M. Anderson. This is another ore carrier that was out there with them. And there were a number of other ships that were out on the lake that night, and a number of ships that were here in the bay to wait for that storm to blow itself out. The Fitzgerald and the Anderson, and laid a little ways behind them were a few other ships trying to make their way to Whitefish Bay to get in out of this massive storm. The Fitzgerald was only 17 miles northwest of Whitefish Point when it disappeared off of the radar screen of the Arthur M. Anderson. It sank that quickly to where they looked at their radar screen, looked at it again a little while later, and they couldn't find the Fitzgerald anymore. It sank so quickly that they didn't have an opportunity to get a distress signal out, and it's really been a mystery ever since as to why this ship sank. No one really knows why the Edmund Fitzgerald sank.
She was there at the dock when the lines cast off and the Fitz got underway, and the sun shone down as the wake trailed out on that cold November day, when she wrapped her cloak over ship and crew and the winds began to roar. Every man aboard tightened down their souls far from the Michigan shore. Mick sorely true telephoned the crew as the storm was setting in. Better hold on tight through this day and night of straight line killer winds. 44 years I have met these storms when nor'easter gales have blown. But oh, these mountains on Superior are the worst I've ever known.
The storm that imperiled the Fitzgerald started over the plains of Oklahoma and gradually intensified until storm warnings were issued for all of Lake Superior. Due to the storm's intensity, the Fitzgerald and the Anderson abandoned the normal shipping lane along the southern shore and proceeded toward the northeast, about halfway between Isle Royale and the Keweenaw Peninsula. This new route would follow the old Fall North route that would offer more protection from prevailing northerly gales. While the Anderson was able to maintain radio contact with the Fitzgerald through to nearly the very end, snow eventually made visual contact impossible. What happened that fateful night is subject to speculation, conjecture, and theory, as there were no witnesses nor any survivors to the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. 29 men went down in a modern Great Lakes ore carrier that was only 17 years old. What actually happened that harrowing night? One man who thinks he may know is Lyle Peterson. Lyle shares with us his theory as to how the Edmund Fitzgerald went down.
My theory has always been that the water wasn't as deep as the boat was long, and therefore when it started to downplane, the propellers will push the boat to the bottom the same as it will on the surface, and I believe that the bow bumped bottom, and that's when it broke in two with no chance for any survivors. I really don't believe the people knew they were on their way to the bottom at that point.
Deep Superior down.
So, did the Edmund Fitzgerald nosedive into the heavy seas and strike bottom with her bow, as Lyle Peterson suggests? Or did the Fitzgerald strike some hidden reef and rupture herself, sinking to the bottom? As the records show, the Fitzgerald did come close to the dangerous 6-fathom shoal north of Caribou Island. But did the Fitzgerald actually hit a reef while navigating around the island?
Deep Superior, it's no surprise.
The first lighthouse was built here in the late 1840s. The tower that we see behind us was built during Abraham Lincoln's administration. So 1861, the Civil War was just starting, and it was very important to have an aid to navigation here for all the ship traffic passing. Every single ship that goes in and out of Lake Superior must go past Whitefish Point. So you can imagine that this was a pretty strategic location to have a lighthouse. The lighthouse keepers here, pretty remote location to be a keeper, but there were several keepers that had their families, and in one case, one lighthouse keeper and his wife raised their children and their grandchildren right here at Whitefish Point. And they arrived in 1903 and they left in 1931. 28 years straight being a lighthouse keeper up here at Whitefish Point. Very different today with the museum being here. We have thousands of tourists that come through and visit each summer.
Once inside the museum, you're invited to a haunting world of over 170 years of Lake Superior shipwrecks. Inside, there is an enormous second-order Fresnel lens taken from the White Shoal Lighthouse near the Straits of Mackinac. Many maritime artifacts from past and present are on display as well. The museum is also a memorial to the many men and women who perished on the Great Lakes in our rich and varied maritime history.
Early 1920s, you had the Coast Guard arrived and they built a rescue station. Very much like the life-saving service, only a little bit of a different era. And the whole idea here was that these Coast Guard rescue station crew members would be pretty much on guard 24 hours a day, and they would watch for all the ship traffic, and if there were any ships that got into trouble, they had different kinds of tools and different boats that they could use to try to get a crew, either help get the crew off of the ship or just do what they could do to help the situation. So a lot of the buildings you see up here at Whitefish Point are from that era, from the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, and there was an awful lot happening up here at that time. A lot of fog up here, and we get a lot of snowstorms and a lot of rainstorms, just a lot of dramatic weather. A fog signal, when the ship and the navigator can't see the lighthouse, the fog signal still gives them an approximate location. But what these lighthouses and fog signals couldn't do is still prevent a ship from getting into trouble. There were a lot of ways they could get in trouble on Lake Superior.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the show so far. And Dan, you know what? One of the things I've always liked about lighthouses is there's a lot of them that are haunted. Now, you've told quite a few stories about that.
Oh yeah, some of them scare me. I'm afraid to tell them. But I remember the one, the Presqu'île light. Not only that one, but also that Waugoshance light out in the Straits of Mackinac was reportedly haunted with John Herman's ghost. And the kids wrote about that in the second verse. But the third verse, the truth is that the lighthouse was in bad repair. So there was a guy that they called him the Lighthouse Phantom because he didn't want to tell his name, because he would sneak out there, avoid the paperwork, and add years to this lighthouse by fixing the bricks and the stones.
No.
So the kids wanted to write a verse about the Phantom, so he wrote, things got bad for the Waugoshance. She needed to be repaired. So someone called the Lighthouse Phantom, and pretty soon he was there. Fixing bricks and laying stones, let's thank him for what he did. Thanks, Phantom. And wouldn't you know, John Herman's ghost is dancing once again.
Now, Lake Huron, and especially Thunder Bay, right out off of the coast of Alpena, Michigan, is known for treacherous storms. Storms can kick up out of nowhere. Heavy fog can descend upon boats in a moment's notice. So what happened was we developed a reputation for being one of the most treacherous areas in the Great Lakes. And as a result, we have an area just outside of Alpena called Shipwreck Alley. Lying on the bottom off the coast of northeast Michigan are some 200 shipwrecks, and more are being discovered every year. And they date back to early pre-logging days, all the way up to mid-19th century and recently into 1960s, 70s era. Mainly because we just had so many ships coming in and out of port. This was before railroads were developed. It was before road infrastructure was the prime way to travel. Before all of that, boat was the way to go. So we would have anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 ships coming in and out of the Alpena Harbor on an annual basis. So the 40 Mile Point Lighthouse at the northernmost part of our area marks 40 miles between the next closest lighthouses. So that's an interesting point too, because sometimes it wasn't always danger that they were alerting them for. It was a navigation beacon and also kind of like a mile marker like we see on the highways today.
In 1889, the Lighthouse Board recommended that $25,000 be appropriated for construction of a new light and fog signal near Hammond Bay on Lake Huron. Congress finally authorized the project in 1893. When the materials arrived at the Detroit depot, they were loaded aboard the lightship Amaranth and arrived at 40 Mile Point on July 5, 1896. Work began immediately to construct a wood-framed building that would house the work crew during construction of the lighthouse and later serve as a barn for the keeper's horses. This structure still stands today and has been restored for use as a gift shop.
Well, there's a lot of reasons for lighthouses. Here at the 40 Mile Point Lighthouse, you get to walk out here on the beach and see what it is. This is the J.S. Fay. It sank in 1905. Probably due to weather just like this that we've got today. It's pretty windy out here. The reefs are out there. They had to be careful. The only way that they could tell where they're at were lighthouses like this, and sometimes that wasn't even enough.
The Fay, with the Rhodes in tow, departed from Escanaba, Michigan, and was downbound on Lake Huron. Destination, Ashtabula, Ohio. Both boats were fully loaded with iron ore. The captain hugged the coast, seeking some protection from the violent wind and savage waves. The Fay was being swept to shore. The seasoned captain turned toward open water, desperately trying to gain control of his ship. Water rushed into the hull. The fires in the boilers would be extinguished, leaving the boat powerless and adrift. Cold, wet, and nearly frozen, the crew crowded into the forward cabin. The captain struggled to bring the Fay around and head to shore toward 40 Mile Point Light Station. It was a close race, but the Fay made it. Her bow struck a sandbar and the entire forward cabin was torn off. The wheelhouse, deck, mates, and captain's rooms were ripped from the deck. Incredibly, huge waves lifted the structure and carried it to shore where it washed up on the sandy beach near the light station. The captain and 10 crewmen were safe inside. First mate David Size of Port Huron and 2 other crewmen weren't so fortunate. Clinging to the beached hull, the struggling men ripped off a spar and used it to paddle to shore. The first mate attempted to swim but was overcome by the cold and was lost.
Now, in between Sturgeon Point and 40 Mile Point, we have a collection of very unique lighthouses. On land, we have Little Red that sits at Alpena's City Boat Harbor. We also have the Old and New Presqu'île lighthouses. The first is the Old Presqu'île Lighthouse. It includes hand-hewn stone steps. It's a little bit shorter than other ones, and it was built in 1840. Also rumored to be haunted. A mile from this lighthouse, we have the New Presqu'île Lighthouse. The Old Presqu'île Lighthouse is the oldest accessible lighthouse on the Great Lakes. The New Presqu'île Lighthouse is the tallest accessible lighthouse on the Great Lakes. And it includes keepers' quarters that have been turned into a gift shop and interpretive center, and then also a 1905 house that was used to house other employees working at this point.
Presqu'île is French for peninsula, literally almost an island.
There are persistent rumors that the old Presqu'île Lighthouse is haunted. Now, I don't hold much stock in these tales, but many people have said curious things have happened at the old light. I'll be spending my time as a keeper at the new Presqu'île Light.
The 1870 lighthouse is the tallest light on the Great Lakes, located in northeastern Lower Michigan on Lake Huron's beautiful Sunrise shore.
A great symbol of what these beacons of light were meant for on the Great Lakes. A sentinel of hope, telling sailors that there was safe harbor ahead and leading them into port.
When you approach the old lighthouse, you may feel like you are entering an enchanted land with its cozy cottage-style residence and 38-foot tower. Visible from many points from the harbor, it's also a place of mystery. The mystery is not from its 31 years of operation, but from a former resident, George Paris.
The old lighthouse is haunted, the light keeps shining on. Even though the power's off and the lighthouse keeper's gone, no one can explain it, it's a mystery we share. They say a ghostly spirit will keep showing up there. We say yes to you, old Presqu'île Light.
Here, we were together for 14 summers when George was alive. And then he passed away in January '92, and then I had a light that started coming on in '92, and it's been coming on ever since. So we had Unsolved Mysteries, a segment of Unsolved Mysteries come out. They started at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they finished at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were busy trying to figure out the light, and they still haven't really figured it out. But they said it's coming from the harbor lights, but I know better.
A new lighthouse is standing, the old one shines no more, except for when the keeper's ghost comes knocking at the door. No one's there to open it, still he gets inside.
Coast Guard has simply classified this as an unidentified light.
The waters off Presqu'île have been a busy shipping lane for decades and are home to 9 incredible shipwrecks. The bows of some of the ships are visible to the naked eye in the clear waters of Lake Huron. How many lives were saved by the welcoming beacon of the Presqu'île lighthouses can only be imagined. The new Presqu'île light flashes yet today as a guardian to the freighters making passage on Michigan's Lake Huron. Because of its popularity, picturesque form, and location, The Tawas Point Lighthouse is often the subject of photographs and even of needlepoint illustrations. The trees, sand, and the sound of waves and wind in the distance call to all lighthouse lovers to walk the grounds and tour the buildings. Tawas Point lies near the northern entrance to Saginaw Bay. Formerly called Ottawa Point, the name was officially changed to Tawas Point in 1902. The point presents a hazard to navigation as it juts out into Lake Huron. It also shelters Tawas Bay, protecting ships from strong north or northeast winds. Due to the changing shoreline, the first lighthouse constructed in 1852 on the point ended up being over a mile inland. In fact, it was so far inland that mariners were unable to see the lighthouse's light. To add to the problem, this lighthouse was known for its dim light. With all these problems combined, it caused a shipwreck from Captain Olmsted's schooner Dolphin. He blamed the lighthouse, stating that it was too dim to see the light. Tourists may not be the only ones roaming around the Tawas Point Lighthouse. There's been a story around for years about a young girl who some say they have seen sitting by the lower steps late at night, said Chuck Allen, Tawas Point State Park Recreation Supervisor. Quote, "I have never actually seen her, but I catch myself looking when I drive by out there late at night." End quote. It's said to be the ghost of a young girl dressed in pink that has been seen at the Tawas Lighthouse. The girl is believed to be the daughter of one of the lighthouse keepers. She supposedly died of pneumonia in the late 1800s. There have been numerous sightings of the mysterious girl. Once at the top of the lighthouse, 70 feet in the air, the view is spectacular as you can see 16 miles out into Lake Huron. The lighthouse and the keeper's house are now illuminated at night by an exterior lighting system. Because of its location, the lighthouse became a part of Tawas Point State Park and is now operated by the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Parks and Recreation Bureau and the Michigan Department of History, Arts, and Libraries Michigan Historical Center. With the assistance of the nonprofit Friends of Tawas Point State Park, lighthouse tours are conducted during most weekends from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and also at other dates throughout the year.
Before we end today's Lighthouse special, we would like to introduce you to Rick Mixter. Rick is past president of the Great Lakes Lighthouse Keepers Association and Lighthouse Authority. Rick has produced many videos on lighthouses and has explored them not only from the top, but is an avid diver and gives insight that most of us will never see.
Great Lakes Lighthouse Keepers Association was formed in the 1980s, and it was a group of people who were descendants of lighthouse keepers, and they were worried that these stories would vanish. So they thought, why don't we start an association that would collect all of these stories? And they did that, and at first a very small group, and then eventually they thought, well, why don't we save an actual lighthouse? And Dick Moll, who is our founding father, if you will, found the St. Helene light was one that needed to be saved. It had been burned up for the most part. Hunters and people who'd come out to the island there that's just on the other side of the Mackinac Bridge. It was very abused, and he managed to bring in some Boy Scouts, and more importantly their parents and friends who could replace the brickwork, who could do woodwork inside, replace the roof, and eventually some finances came in too where professionals could be brought in and really renovate this light back to the 1900s of how its splendor was. So it's amazing to see that. They eventually also picked up the Sheboygan rear range light, another fantastic project that's in Sheboygan, and again all of those dollars and those funding are coming from GLICA, the Great Lakes Lighthouse Keepers Association, based on tours that we do with other lighthouses, based on fundraisers that we do and talks, and especially membership of our group. There's no better way to learn about lighthouses than to be a member of the Great Lakes Lighthouse Keepers Association, because quarterly you will get a magazine that has all kinds of lighthouse stories per our mission, and also more on the tours that we give all around the Great Lake.
Well, I hope you enjoyed part 2 of Guardians of the Great Lake, the Michigan Shore. We had a great time doing this. If you happen to miss the first on the series, don't worry. We've got a DVD for you. We also have a CD for you.
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, we'll put them into a combination where you can get the whole thing just by going to our website at greatgetaways.tv. Dan, you've done such a great job with us. I'm so happy you were able to join us today.
It was fun being on this side of the camera with you, Tom.
I always enjoy it, Dan.
Thanks a lot. Fresnel lights flashed out to sea along the Northland shore, and south along the sheltered bay where sailors came before.
This pure Michigan experience has lit the way for us from our nautical past to the future of navigation through one of the greatest resources, the Great Lakes waterways. From the time of kerosene lamps to today's state-of-the-art lighting, our fascination with lighthouses will continue.
And the white-capped waves that rake the beach, and still the lights remain. The guardians of the lakes are true for sail and iron wakes that spin like threads far out to sea upon the inland bay. That spin like threads out to sea upon the inland bay. When distant shores shall disappear and storms are closing in, as fog and gale like curtains fall to mountain waves and wind, and course unsteady lost offshore, brave crews will strain to see that guardian light, that saving sight there on the shore shall be. That guardian light, that saving sight there on the shore shall be. That guardian light, that saving sight there on the shore shall be. That guardian light, that saving sight there on the shore shall be.